Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the music writing, ranking, and reviewing podcast that we like to call Music Meltdown, in which we rate, rank, and review any artist's discography, songs, musical topics, really whatever comes to mind. This episode had the same lineup for another 2000s indie rock band that nobody cared about after the year 2010. Going to be talking about the band, talking about Interpol today. Well known for Turn on the Bright Lights, and other albums too. Interpol are a weird band because I hear nothing but critical praise and love for that debut record, but I feel like in a lot of ways it often overshadows the rest of the catalog. I know there are some diehard fans. Michelle, of course, Mutual of all bars, absolutely loves them, but I don't know. They're an interesting band, I would say. Very much the sort of poster child for what the post-punk revival scene was, very inspired by Joy Division, and you can definitely tell in Paul Banks's delivery and song structures, heavy post-punk influences, notably Joy Division. And I'm not a big Joy Division fan, so it'll be interesting to see how all of their records play. Rich, how are you feeling about Interpol going into this?
Yeah, I became aware of Interpol when their debut album came out. I was aware of the critical acclaim and their comparisons to Joy Division and other post punk bands. At some point, I did hear Turn on the Bright Lights, and I think I thought it was pretty good, but nowhere near the hype. I also thought it wasn't as good as Joy Division. Um, I'm not so sure now. Um, I don't know. I listened to a little bit of Joy Division today, and I think I like the Joy Division better still. It's more angular and gothy. Um, but I don't know. It's a lot closer than it used to be. I went through a Joy Division phase back in the 90s. I just thought they were brilliant, thanks especially to vocalist Ian Curtis. But I have cooled off on Joy Division somewhat since then. Um, but anyway, I never did hear another Interpol album after their first one, so most of this was new to me.
Well, if that's the case for you, I figure I'll mention I done this a, a little bit earlier than now a year ago. I'd listened to all six of their records. I'd known Turn on the Bright Lights beforehand, and as well I knew the follow-up Antics, but everything else was fairly new to me, and I never got around to the new one last year, so I actually knew everything going into this. But Mark, how are you thinking about Interpol beforehand?
I first became aware of them in around 2007, I think, maybe 2008. And it was not any particular album, it was just individual songs I came across. Our cable TV provider used to have a on-demand video service where you could, it was kind of like YouTube, but it was just limited to music videos, and you could dial, punch in any video, any video they had in their catalog. And they usually had about 1,000. And just glancing through there, I discovered some of their songs, and I liked them, but I never really pursued them. I like I was really into some of their contemporaries more, namely Modest Mouse and the Yeah. And so I didn't do a deep dive. I just came across their songs now and then. It wasn't until about maybe 2012 when I listened to the debut for the first time, and I liked it, but I still didn't really do any deep diving. Then later, maybe 2 years ago, I listened to Antics and Our Love to Admire. And I don't know why, but I didn't go any deeper than that. I kind of just stopped after those first three albums. And then, so this past 2 weeks, listening to them has been mostly new stuff. A lot of it I'd heard bits and pieces of, but never the complete albums beyond the first three.
Cool to hear. So, didn't expect me to be such the resident, I don't know if I want to say fan, but sort of
The
on the
expert.
knowledge, I suppose. Yes. That being said, though, it's 7 studio records as of last year, so one at a time. Because of how we did Yeah, Yeah, Yeahs with Rich starting out, he's going to close it, and we're going to have Mark kick it off this time with his least favorite or worst best Interpol record, depending on how you look at it.
My number 7 is The Other Side of Make Believe, the 2022 release. After listening to the first 6 this past week, this one was kind of a disappointment. I'll give it 3 stars, but it doesn't have the energy that the previous albums have. The songwriting's not as crisp. They sound kind of tired on it, and I listened to it a couple times, and I really struggled to find songs that I loved, and there wasn't a single song on it there that I loved. Only 2 of them even made my top 30 songs list, and they're at the bottom of it. It's not my favorite album. It's not a bad album. I initially had it at 2.5 on first listen. On the second listen, it grew up to a 3, but I can't go any higher than 3, and that's kind of that's a very, very fragile 3. It could dip again, but it's not a bad album. It's just not a great album compared to the rest of them. It lacks. So my number 7 is The Other Side of Make Believe.
Interesting, because I agree with most of what you're saying. However, I don't feel it on that album. I feel like that's a bit of a bounce back because I feel like they had a slip off after the self-titled record with those following 2, which the bottom for me is going to be Marauder. And yeah, I just feel like this album, and to a lesser degree Pintor, are just incredibly derivative of what came before it. They're very clearly influenced by Joy Division, and it shows in everything that they do. And on this one, it's like a watered down version of the debut, basically, to me. Just front to back. I didn't get a ton of evolution from Interpol, if that makes sense. I feel like they had one sound kind of picked out from the beginning, added like a few tiny things, had a big sort of diversion on the self-titled, and then from there just kind of fell static for a while. And this was the one that definitely hurt the most in that. They're retreading the same ground with just more dull arrangements to back it up. I think Paul Banks is a good singer. Consistently through here, I think he's able to propel the songs. But on these bottom 2 records, I feel like he just is kind of operating off of autopilot. Same with the band. I don't know. This isn't a terrible record. I think everything it goes for, it does fairly well. I just didn't really have anything from this one that even got into consideration for my top songs, though. If I want to listen to Interpol, I'm not going to listen to this one. I'm just going to listen to the earlier stuff. Have it 2.5 stars for Marauder at number 7. So.
All right, cool. Yeah, my number 7 is also Marauder. That's from 2018, their 6th album. You know, I struggled to appreciate this band. They're post-punk revivalists, and I do love post-punk, but I wasn't always digging this music. I do think they pretty much stick to the post-punk playbook on all of these albums. There's not a lot of deviation between them, not in their approach. Um, at times, I struggled to figure out how I felt about the music. I found it to be pretty repetitive. It typically begins with a simple guitar figure repeated over and over. The vocals are rather monotone, the music not very melodic, but something about them appeals to me, at times anyway. But by the time of Marauder, the atmospherics that made their music interesting are largely missing, and we have more conventional, less interesting pop alt rock songs. Paul Banks' voice drones on like always. He does sound quite a bit like Ian Curtis, except not as icy and alien. So, not as much character, but plenty robotic. There's also some Jim Morrison and Sinatra in there at times. NYSMAW is a cool song, lame title, but cool song. The rest of these tracks are pretty mid, if that. The 1 minute interludes are fine. I don't mind those, but they don't really do much either. Um, I'm not too enthused about Marauder. Frankly, I think it's mediocre. I've got it at 2 stars.
Ouch. I don't think that you've gone that low before on here, so can't wait for Pavement. That's gonna be fun.
Maybe the B-52s. I wasn't too happy about their first.
I think you
The bottom of my list was pretty low.
I think you bottomed at 2.5 for Whammy, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
But that's nothing compared to my 1 for Funplex, so you're all in the clear, my friend.
My number 6 is the self-titled 2010 release, Interpol. I like that album, but I can't say that I love it. I agree with what both of you have said, that they don't have a lot of range. They kind of do one thing and they do it over and over and over again, and sometimes they do it better than others. And my first thought was that they do the same thing all the time. The reason why I didn't like the latest album was because it sounded different to me, but they kind of on every album have 1 or 2 songs that are slightly out of the mold. But unlike, say, like the Yeah Yeah Yeahs we talked about last time, where every album is a different adventure, these are all pretty much the same adventures, but some are just better than others. And the 2010 release, self-titled, it's not a lot different from the albums that came before it, but it's just not as good. And the one song that really stands out for me there is Memory Serves. And Lights. Lights is really the one I like the best on that album. But it took me a long time to come around on that song because it's just so heavy and draggy. And I don't know, it took maybe, well, I became aware of that song in 2010, and it was only in the last 2 years that I actually got to like it. I go 3.5 stars on this one because I can listen to it over and over. Infrequently I can listen to it over, but I can put it on and play it from start to finish. It drags at points, unlike the latest album. But I can't say that I love it. I like it. I go 3.5 stars on it though, but I don't see it ever rising above that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Pretty big divergence between you and I on that one. So it is what it is. Guess Rich will be the wild card there. Number 6 for me, as I kind of alluded to earlier, going with El Pintor. I don't know. I feel like this is a difficult one to talk about with Marauder because I just find this one to be very bland. It's by the books. They aren't developing, they aren't really growing as a group. Sounds like the self-titled and the debut kind of washed into a blender, but you lose a lot of the intrigue and the texture of those records, I suppose. I don't know. I don't know. And as well, the opener track, All the Rage Back Home, it had almost like a pop punk quality to it to me that I didn't quite care for. The best song on here for sure for me was Same Town, New City. But overall, I just find it to be rather unremarkable. I have this one as well at 2.5 stars for El Pintor.
All right. I'll be talking about that quite a bit later. My number 6 is The Other Side of Make Believe from last year, their 7th most recent studio album. And I guess it was some sort of big deal that they actually used a little bit of piano on the album, breaking the mold to some degree, even though they had used it before. It's only on a couple tracks, and it's nothing too special. Like I said, they almost always start off with a little figure they repeat over and over, usually on guitar. This time it's piano. They pretty much always start their songs like that. Overall, I find this album to be quite bland. Into the Night has some cool bass and a weird time signature, but it's just pretty good. Renegade Hearts is rocking, but the chorus is weak. Passenger begins with a great beat, but the song just ends up being blah. I find Grand Hotel to be unremarkable alt rock with some lame lyrics. Um, Interpol lyrics tend to be just a bunch of horseshit, really. Um, Attempts to be poetic, I suppose, but largely just nonsense. But Mr. Credit is a really good rocker, and the last two tracks are actually pretty great. Um, or at least they sounded great coming after what I had just heard. But I think they saved the album from complete mediocrity, bringing in some much needed melodicism sorely missed elsewhere. So I'm up to 2.5 for this one. Meh.
Alrighty, seems like Mark is the resident Interpol fan here, so fun
It's
to see.
looking like it, isn't it?
Absolutely.
This ain't over yet.
Okay, okay.
All right, my number 5 is Our Love to Admire from 2007. Um, this one I expected much more from because it's got some songs I really like a lot, which we'll talk about more when we get to the song portion of the recording. But in between the really good songs, it's kind of snoozy. And it's kind of the same thing that I've said last time, and we've all said, there's not a lot of variety with this band. They've got kind of one speed. Every once in a while, they put their foot on the gas or they tap the brakes a little bit, but they pretty much do one thing. They do it over and over and over again. Sometimes it sounds better than others. And this album has more hits than misses, but it's got enough misses that I was disappointed when I played it, considering it's got some of my absolute favorite songs that there's on it. Um, I'm going 3.5 stars on it. It edges out the self-titled 2010 release, but I expected so much more from it, especially after the first two albums and having what I consider my favorite song on it. I expected more, and it just doesn't. It's not satisfying enough.
Okay. That's a fair review. I'd say after the first two, it's a bit of a letdown. However, I still have it above the other side of Make Believe, which is going to be my number 5. I don't know. It's another fairly standard record, I would say. I view it as mainly just being a more successful attempt on what they tried on Marauder, very much like the self-titled or Bright Lights, and it's fine overall. It's rather inoffensive, and it's a solid crop of songs. With especially the opener Tony, I thought was actually very, very strong. I don't know. It lacks the spark or emotion that the first couple of records had. But overall, out of their later period work, I feel like it's the most interesting and holds its own uh, weight the best, I would say. Have that one at 3 stars. I think it's a pretty decent album, but still not quite a favorite or anything. It's number 5, The Other Side of Make Believe.
All right, cool. My number 5 is Antics from 2004, their second album. I think this album is an attempt to be more tuneful than their debut, more melodic, more pop oriented. Um, but Paul Banks still has that robotic Ian Curtis voice droning on in that post punk style, which is, I think, is more suited to more atmospheric material. There are some very good songs here, though, such as the opener Next Exit, which is a more melodic pop song for the group. Take You on a Cruise has a cool ethereal segment, while Not Even Jail and Public Pervert are very good as well. But then you have some mid tracks like Evil, which features road verses from Paul sounding robotic as ever. And the more pop oriented Narc is just okay. The baby come ons are getting a little tired already. I'm not crazy about the album title either. I'm at 3 on this one, just okay.
My number 4 is one that both of you have already mentioned, Marauder in 2018. I was surprised how much I like this album. I didn't expect to, and they don't break any ground here. I can't say that they've grown or that they're doing something they haven't done before, but this one is one that I could play. I could put it on right now and enjoy it. I could play it tomorrow morning and enjoy it again. It's got, a decent number of songs that I really like. If you really love nothing, The Rover, number 10. Those are all songs that make my top 30, top 40. And I would have come in at a 4 with this album. It's got more stuff I like than that I don't like, and the stuff I like quite a bit. It doesn't break any ground. It's not new. It's not fresh. But if you like Interpol, this is Interpol, and I like them. And I like this album. It's my number 4, Marauder 4.0.
Renee, glad to see you enjoying it so much. I mean, I really do feel like this is one of those bands that if you like one record, for the most part, you're going to like them all. I think it does just come down to how big of an Interpol fan you really are. Because while I am saying that there are good records here, in fact, my number 4, Our Love to Admire, I'm up to 3.5 stars. I think going up from here, these are all good albums. But I don't know, I just feel like they have a signature sound, and if you like some of it, you're gonna like all of it, Not much more to add there, but regards to Our Love to Admire, I feel like this is definitely where you're starting to grow weary of the template that they follow across these first 3 records. As they went on, the songs start to wane a bit, with this one definitely being their most inconsistent of the first 3. Cuts like The Scale, Fired Up, and The Close of the Lighthouse are all fine. Despite that, I think there are some great songs here. Banks, still a very strong vocalist, and something I've failed to remark is pretty much all throughout the first 4 records, I am always a big fan of the rhythm section. I think they are really strong, helping to keep the grooves up and everything going tightly. Rest My Chemistry, as well as Wrecking Ball, I thought were very strong songs across here. I'm at 3.5 stars. I think it's a pretty good record. Lacks a bit of the identity of the first couple. It sort of falls in the shadow of the first 2 for me, but still a good album. 3.5 stars for Our Love to Admire.
Yeah, I think you may have a good argument there that if you like some Interpol, you will tend to like the rest. But I I did struggle a little bit to differentiate between these albums, and I ended up doing so. And so there's a nice little spread, but it took a little bit of work. Um, my number 4 is Interpol, their self-titled album from 2010, their 4th. This album was difficult for Interpol to make, and bassist Carlos D quit the band shortly after it was completed. But the bass lines are some of the most interesting parts of this album. That's certainly the case with opening song Success, which is otherwise just pretty good. Again, not the most melodic vocals, but Barricade is catchy, and I dig the rhythm on Safe Without. Try It On, I think, is the first time they prominently use a piano, and they use it to play the same little riff over and over, but it's actually a pretty good song. All of the Ways has a tasty atmosphere, while last track, The Undoing, is actually quite moving. The album has those repetitive and monotone qualities I've been criticizing, but at this point, I kind of like them, at least to some extent. I'm up to 3.25 stars on this one. Pretty good.
All right, up to number 3. Number 3, I have their second album, Antics, from 2004. Um, this album, it does it slots nicely after the first album. It doesn't show any growth. It's a little bit smoother. It's not quite as it's a little more polished, is what I'm trying to say, slightly. But it still is the same sound. A lot of good songs. A few clunkers in there. Well, I wouldn't even call them clunkers. They just don't fire me up. But overall, it's got some great music on it. It's the same drony vocals with the I mean, they're very much a monotone band, but it's a color that appeals to me, and they do it very well here. A lot of good songs there. Oh yeah, this is where I was first introduced to the band. The song "Come Here" was definitely the first song of theirs I ever heard. I liked it instantly, but for some reason it made me curious to seek out more of them. But I wish I had, because I really like this album. I like the songs on it, and I'm at a strong 4. I could go 4.25 on this, 4.25 for Antics.
Damn. I can't tell what I disagree with more, the score or just the fact that quarter stars were used. But it is what it is.
I was giving a thumbs up for the quarter star.
Yeah, that's the
I
unfortunate part.
didn't have it written there, but after I heard Rich say it, I thought, well, I can go there.
Yes. It is what it is.
Around.
Do whatever makes you happy. Antics as well. My number 3. Antics or Turn on the Bright Lights Part 2. Either or works out fine. Still think Banks is a pretty good singer. Rhythm section is still really strong. And the general sound of the band isn't too compelling to me. I think if they're good, what they're doing is well made, and if you like the sound, you're gonna love them. It's just not my personal preference. I don't know. Evil, Narc, Slow Hands, all really strong songs, but this album just leaves me wanting a bit more growth, a bit more experimentation within their songcraft and their writing overall. I don't know. I still think it's a good album. I have it at 3.5 stars. I'm just not going crazy for it, and I think it's a pretty good record. Just not one that I'm ever going to reach for, per se. Definitely take my favorite tracks and kind of run away. Number 3, Antics, 3.5.
All right, cool. My number 3 is Our Love to Admire from 2007, their third album. They bounced back from Antics with a better batch of songs. The tremolo guitar solo on opener Pioneer to the Falls is tasty. There's some interesting keyboard and subtle orchestra. This album was their major label debut, and they had more money to spend on production. Mammoth and Pace is the Trick are good songs. I like the way All Fired Up changes up the rhythm, while Rest My Chemistry has a cool, slow beat. There's some nice orchestra at the end of Wrecking Ball and a cool little sound effect in there that I like. The closing track, The Lighthouse, is an unusual one, featuring a quasi flamenco style guitar. The full band comes in at the end, and it sounds like they added some Celeste in there too. I like this one. I'm up to 3.5 stars. Good.
All right. We're all getting into the positive area. My number 2, it's going to come as a shock to Adrian. Well, but you can figure out what's left. My number 2 is from 2014, El Pintor. And I was as surprised as you that I like this album. After I saw them steadily declining from the debut through the self-titled 2010. Every album I have going down a little bit. and I wasn't expecting much from this one. The first time I heard it was about 2 years ago during the Album of the Year series. I played it and I thought, wow, they're back. This is a revelation. It's not new, it's not different, it's just solid. It's got so many good songs on it. The lead single on it, or I don't know if they had any singles, but the opener on it, All the Rage Back Home, it's one of their best rocking tunes, I think. My Desire, Anywhere, Same Town, New Story, Tidal Wave. I love all those songs. I don't think there's any clunkers on this one. It lacks energy on one or two, but overall, it's a good, solid album, and I'm going to give this one 4.25 also. But I definitely like it better than the last 4.25.
Interesting.
So
Glad to
4.3 then.
I'm glad that you love that one so much. I thought you were going the opposite way with that whole thing, and I was like, just I won't
That
say
was
anything
borderline.
because Rich still has the chance to do it. But I'm looking at the Wikipedia now. The two singles that released before the album were All the Rage Back Home, as well as Ancient Ways were the two singles. And then as well, My Desire, Anywhere, and Everything Is Wrong released after the record came out as singles. So that being said, my number 2 is Turn on the Bright Lights. Bit of an indie rock juggernaut. I think Interpol's debut record is very strong. Rhythm section, like I was saying, is great. Absolutely love the bass across this album. I think Paul Banks is a pretty good singer and a strong lyricist across here. Pretty much the birth and the epicenter of the mid-aughts post-punk revival scene. The run from Obstacle 1 to Stella is just fantastic. I feel like the last songs leave a bit to be desired for me, notably outside of Leif Erikson. All in all, I think it's a really strong record. I have it at 4 stars. It's incredibly iconic and incredibly notable to the time period it released, just like the self-titled More. So, number 2, Turn on the Bright Lights, 4 stars.
Okay. Like Mark, I have El Pintor as my number 2. Again, that's from 2014, their 5th album. And I had this one in my top spot for a while. I was kind of wary about putting Bright Lights at the top, thought it was too predictable, but I can't fight it. That's where it belongs. So El Pintor takes the silver. El Pintor is a very strong set of songs, though. I think they're catchy, and I think there's some cool atmospherics from lead guitarist Daniel Kessler. Opening track, All the Rage Back Home. Mark is right about that. Great energy on that one. Begins with some sweet vocal and electric guitar before it bursts to life into a swift little pop song. I think they took some cues from the Arctic Monkeys album, AM, which was released the previous year. Same Town, New Story has some of those high-pitched Arctic Monkey style background vocals. And there's some nice harmonies on Blue Supreme. The only mid song is Ancient Ways, but I love how the lyric says, fuck the ancient ways, because fuck them. This is a very enjoyable album and maybe their most tuneful. I'm up to 4 stars.
All right, well, that leaves for me, my number 1 is Turn on the Bright Lights. Probably not a surprise to anybody. The debut. It's just a damn strong debut. Song after song on there just bangs. Obstacle 1, the opener is a great opener. NYC, PDA, they were on a bit of a acronym or initial spree there. Say Hello to the Angels, Roland. Just so many good songs, and this one edges out El Pintor for me. It is the template though that established everything they did afterwards. They never really made a left turn or a right turn and changed their style. There were just little swerves here and there where they um, did something a little bit different on a particular song, but the album sound pretty much stayed the same from beginning to end. This is where it all began, and it was just such a good, solid start. I'm at 4.5 for Turn On the Bright Lights. I
Nice.
considered giving it a 5, but I just couldn't quite get there with it. But 4.5 is a strong 4.5.
Nice, nice. Glad to see you enjoy it so much. And I wanted to ask you about this because you kind of alluded to really enjoying this beforehand. You mentioned before sort of the yeah yeah yeahs sort of lessening in your approach after doing them again while Interpol grew up. At this time, who would you say that you would take with yeah yeah yeahs or Interpol? I think both Rich and I are clear that he'd take yeah yeah yeahs and I'd take Interpol. So
Um, I still, yeah, yeah, yeahs were my favorite band for nearly 10 years.
yeah,
And that's hard to let go of completely. They have a more diverse catalog. You know, it's not a big catalog, neither is Interpol's, but they do more. They took more chances. They grew. Interpol is just one lane. They got in that lane and they're still on that lane. And I don't know if they'll ever get off of it. Um, it turns out I like that road they're on. I would like to see some variety, but they know what they do. They do it pretty well, and I don't think they're ever going to change. If it, you know, if they were both coming to my town the same night, I would go see AAS.
fair enough.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
with that being said, time for me to discuss the one left turn they made in the entire catalog to me. Mind you, not a big one, just like to get off the road, just get back onto the road right after. But talking about the self-titled Interpol record, this one's a bit divisive. I've seen it's as low as their second lowest on Rate Your Music, which to me is wild. To clarify, I'm still only at 4 stars. I think it's really good, but not quite great. And I don't know. I just find this record to be very endearing. They're straying from their typical post-punk revival roots. They're starting to experiment a bit more with electronics and less direct song structures. At points, it's not all the way there, but I almost got like light hints of like a band similar to like LCD Sound System. It's an equally strong batch of songs here, and when compared to a record like Turn on the Bright Lights, I feel like this one, through the track listing, it's more diverse. They attempt more things. And whether successful or not, to me, it's just a more engaging overall listen. Uh, and generally speaking, I just think that there's tons of great tracks on here. My favorite being the song Always Malaise, as Rich mentioned. Barricade's great, though. And yeah, just front to back for me, it plays the best of their albums. So my number one going to be the self-titled Interpol record, Call Me Crazy All You Want, because I am most certainly incorrect. Rich, state to me why the debut is clearly the best Interpol record.
Well, I guess this makes me basic. Um, I have to give it to their most highly acclaimed album. Um, yeah, I think it's got a tasty, atmospheric post-punk sound, kind of dark and gothy. Um, the opening track is ethereal and haunting, killer atmosphere, low-key exciting when it comes on. Second track, Obstacle One, features Paul's deadpan vocals and a key change in the guitars that's very effective. And I think the Killers were listening. Paul's robotic Ian Curtis voice is in full effect, not terribly melodic, but I think this is a very clever, often subtle alternative rock album. Say Hello to the Angels reminds me of the Smiths. It's a good song despite a slightly annoying chorus. A handful of these songs are excellent, including Untitled, Hands Away, Stella Was a Diver and She Was Always Down, and The New. And since I was having so much trouble getting a handle on Interpol, I thought I'd get my mom's opinion. My mom's a pretty musical person, so I played some of these Turn on the Bright Lights tracks for her, and she was not impressed. She found it too repetitive and the singer too monotone. And then she went on to explain how the Beatles were so much better with great chord changes and how their music sounds so great orchestrated. And she makes very good points, but I still like the atmosphere Interpol creates with this album, so I give them credit for that. Um, Overall, I consider the album to be very good, and it even achieves greatness in places, but I'm still at 4 stars.
Hey, glad to see you enjoy it and get at least something out of this. In regards, you mentioned the Killers, yeah, big influence on their debut. It's not overt because they have that new wave flair on everything and that like kind of almost modern take on disco at points, but you can definitely, if you like focus in on the song structures and whatnot, you can get a ton of Turn on the Bright Lights all throughout Hot Fuss. The difference
Oh,
is Bring Them Flowers fucking blows Paul Banks out of the water 90% of the time.
Yeah.
Anyways, songs.
All right. My number 10 is If You Really Love Nothing off Marauder. It's just I love that song. It's just a great song. Number 9, The Heinrich Maneuver. That was one of the early ones I discovered. I think that was probably the second song of theirs I heard, and I liked it immediately. Um, if we had done this 10 years ago, it probably would have been number 2 on my list, but now that I know more about them, it's down to number 9. Number 8, I have Obstacle One, Turn on the Bright Lights. I One thing they consistently do is their opening songs on their albums are almost always really good. Number 7, I have Lights off of the self-titled. That one, like I said, it took me a while. That one really didn't work for me at first. It was just so heavy and it felt plotting. But I don't know. At some point, it flipped a switch on me and the light came on. Number 6, I have Anywhere off El Pintor. Another really good song off that album. Number 5, I have Next Exit off Antics. Um, that one could have gone higher, but except the ones above it are all my favorite songs. My Desire off El Pintor is at number 4, and then the best ones, All the Rage Back Home, number 3. Um, that was really the discovery for me because the songs above that I already knew, but that one I I first came across it 2 years ago, but it didn't really stick. But this past 2 weeks, that's the one I've enjoyed the most. At number 2, I have Come Here off of Antics, the very first song theirs I ever heard, and that I loved from the moment I heard it. But my number 1 song is probably, it probably sounds a little trite, but the No I in Threesome off Our Love to Admire. That one, I think, has their best vocals or their best lyrics. It's got a good vocal. It's one of their most melodic songs, and I just enjoy the hell out of it. And the funny thing about it is, I totally misinterpreted the meaning of the song for about 5 years. It wasn't until I sat down and really listened to the words and I realized what he was really saying. At first, I thought he was saying that he was describing a love triangle, and he was trying to talk his girl out of being interested in the other guy. It wasn't until I really gave the words a strong listen that I realized he was proposing a threesome as a way to solve their relationship problems. But that didn't make me like it any less. I still love it. It's my favorite song. No I in Threesomes, number 1 for me.
Anything
that
make you
makes
like
me
it
love
more?
it more. Shit.
Yeah, that one was one of the considerations. All of my top 10 are self-titled and Bright Light songs. Ones that were just close to making it were Rest of My Chemistry and Wrecking Ball, I believe, both from Our Love to Admire. That being said, my top 10, I have Stella Was a Driver and She's Always Fine from Turn on the Bright Lights, Untitled from Turn on the Bright Lights, Try It On from the self-titled, PDA from Turn on the Bright Lights, Success from Self-Titled. Number 5, I have Obstacle 1 from Turn on the Bright Lights. Number 4, I had Barricade from the Self-Titled. Number 3, Obstacle 2 from Turn on the Bright Lights. My top 2, really close, but I think this is where I tip the hat to Turn on the Bright Lights, with my number 2 being Always Malaise, and my winner being NYC off Turn on the Bright Lights. Great song.
NYC, okay. And yeah, Barricade is catchy enough to get stuck in my head. That's a good choice. All right. My number 10 is Go Easy Palermo from The Other Side of Make Believe. Not sure why, but the last track on their last album does it for me. A bit more melodic than your usual Interpol, I guess. Number 9, The Lighthouse, Our Love to Admire. Yeah, they really do something different with this one. We complain about them being samey, but they got this weird flamenco guitar going, and the full band doesn't come in until the end of the song. Pretty cool. Number 8, Hands Away from Turn on the Bright Lights, really haunting, shimmering atmosphere. 7, My Desire from El Pintor. I just think this is a great song, perhaps a bit more melodic than your typical Interpol song. And the intro does more than play one little segment over and over. It kind of evolves there, so that's good. Number 6 is Mammoth from Our Love to Admire. That's a rockin' track. Number 5 is Big Shot City. Once again, The Other Side of Make Believe. This one's really slinky and sexy. Good melody. Number 4 is The New from Turn on the Bright Lights. Really fantastic song. A long one at 6 minutes. And it proves they could be melodic from the beginning. Number 3, Untitled from Turn on the Bright Lights. This track is most people's introduction to the Interpol world, and I find it very inviting. Number 2, Stella was a diver and she was always down. Turn on the Bright Lights. This is another one over 6 minutes. I just love the moody atmosphere and the way it rocks and the different changes it goes through. But my number 1 is My Blue Supreme from El Pintor. Love this one. I think it's about an imaginary car. I don't know. Really nice vocal harmonies. Just stood out as the best to me.
We had almost 30 different songs listed there. Almost no overlap.
I mean, hey,
Yeah,
given
I
the
think that's very telling too. I think that's very telling.
given the list, I think that says a lot. How many different records were in our top threes? I think it was what, either 4 or 5, which for a 7 album discography says a lot. So I don't know.
Yes. We'll take a bigger panel to get a consensus.
Perhaps. Yeah, I'll still be the only one picking the self-titled as number 1. That being said, though, I don't know. I'm not like crazy about Interpol. I know some people absolutely love them. I don't know. I just think that they're a pretty solid group. Have some good songs, some good records, but nothing I'd really write home about, personally speaking. Obviously, Mark disagrees. I think Rich, you're kind of in a similar camp to me on that, though.
Yeah, but their best material is solid, and I would definitely go to a show, check them out, and I imagine I would probably enjoy it, enjoy myself.
As long
It's
as
a
you don't break.
different beast. See, when you see a band live, there's no distractions. There's nothing to do except sit there and absorb the music, and it's loud and overwhelming. And so I think I could get with this band in a live setting. Um, to sum it up, we were talking a little bit about Interpol on Discord, and Joe Steigerwald recently summed up Interpol this way: They got an initial buzz because they sounded like Joy Division, but when they sort of tried to not sound like Joy Division, people moved on from them.
Yeah.
And I guess that's pretty accurate.
Yeah. Really, after the self-titled, people, I hear very little buzz about those later records. Very little positive buzz, that is. So
They still had some buzz with Antics, but I think it started wearing off quickly after that.
Yeah.
sounds about right. Any closing thoughts here, Mark, or do you think that you've gotten your Interpol?
I can say that I like them more now than I did before I started this deep dive 2 weeks ago, but not a lot more. They didn't open up anything new for me. It was just digging in the same vein, deeper and deeper and deeper, and not finding much new, but finding a lot that I like though still.
Good to hear. Glad that we seem to all get at least something enjoyable out of this one. So that's good to hear. That being said, what are your takes on Interpol? Generally speaking, solid band, but there's something I'm missing. Hope that you all enjoyed this discussion on the group and had a great one. Bye.